Thanks everyone for joining in today. I'm Nick McLean, one of the co-founders of Reside platform. I know your time's really valuable, but at the same time, it's as valuable of your time to invest it in workshops, webinars like these so that you can set your team up for success, whether your team's starting out, you're building it, or you've already scaled it and you're a mega team. 2025 is right around the corner and your agent's goals start today. But beyond that is how do you set your team up for goal setting and the mindset and the leadership that's going to stick and grow? And you're going to learn from somebody that knows how to train agents at the highest level. And we hope you keep coming back and getting more valuable content from the Reside platform. We have a podcast. Maybe some of you we work with currently, and some of you we may work with in the future. And if that happens, great. Otherwise, keep coming back, keep growing. We want everyone to succeed. So here we are. Rewire your team's goal setting mindset, right, Mia? So,
yeah.
Anything to add, Mia?
Yeah, I'm ready to get started. Here's a couple of just some feedback from some of our team members that have gone through my training before and have had really great success. And so I'm excited to bring that to you guys today. We've got a little intro here, and then we're going to dive in.
Awesome. So I'm Nick McLean. I'm the co-founder of Reside, and I'm in the trenches with you. I have a team. I built that team started in 2012 and built it to up to 20% market share, real trends list, wrote a book, $1 Million Agent. And really at this point in my career, it's about helping other people duplicate and repeat exactly what I did in my marketplace. And also teaming up with John Sheplak, Sunit and Preston, and people like Mia to deliver the most amount of value back into the industry that's been so impactful in my life. My team sells 500 homes a year, and here we are. And goal setting is a big part of that. Now meet Mia. It's probably better if you introduced yourself,
Yeah,
unless
absolutely.
you're too humble to do it.
Yeah, I'm gonna really play it. I'm gonna play it down right now. No, my name is Mie Yamashita. I am a national coach and trainer. I work with hundreds of agents across the country, but I've coached and trained thousands of agents. Currently, I spend my days as the director of team production at Reside, and I'm working with our agents internally, training with them 3 days a week, and working with coaching our team owners. And my passion is seeing agents make as much money as they want to make and have as much quality of life as they can possibly have. And so I really do a lot of my own self-work around understanding human behavior and meeting people where they're at. And that is one of the characteristics I have that has made me really successful in being able to partner with agents to hit their goals. Okay. Are you ready for me to dive in, Nick?
Well, I just want to add to that. Yeah, Mia and myself, we take ownership of agent training and productivity. And it's kind of funny because we actually really, really like it.
Yeah.
It's really, really funny. I was talking to Sunit Agrawal. He's a co-founder of Reside. He was the #1 team in California for 2 straight years. And I called Sunit up randomly at like 7 p.m. I said, Sunit, you know what I love to do? It's like, what? What do you love to do? I go, I love training agents. I actually do. I really, really like it. And it's kind of funny because a lot of team leaders are like, who can I hire to do that?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just love it so much. That's the one thing that I haven't given up in my team as I've scaled out to the 7th level and beyond is I just stay in the areas that I get the most energy of. And that's
Yeah.
what's cool about working with you, Mia. I think you share the same sentiment. And so now we can deliver it to everyone else. And
Yeah.
so, and part of that agent development and training is, getting really clear on goals and how to set that up. So Mia, take it away.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk to you guys today about the process of setting goals, the mindset of setting goals, and then the execution piece. So if you've ever done a training with me, I always start with the mindset first and the understanding behind why we do the way that we do things. And I always like to leave you with something tactical. But I want to manage expectations here because although I will be giving you some tactical options at the end, All of that footwork on making those tactical things actually execute at a high level is going to come from laying the groundwork up front around the mindset. And this is exactly where you have to meet your agents at. And so I want to give you some insights today on what the process looks like to actually get to the goal and how to reframe the way that we interact with the goal in general. So we'll start with the mindset. And I want to talk to you about transforming behaviors into results so that your agents will internalize essential skills that become a natural byproduct of their daily actions. Then we'll address the process, which is where we're going to build a culture of accountability so that you can foster a high performance environment, turning your individual efforts into a collective success. And then we'll touch on the execution, where you can deliver coaching that is going to fuel success so that you can drive your agents toward their targets and with confidence and clarity. So let's go ahead and dive into the mindset piece. There's three things I'm going to address around the mindset. Number one is we're going to redefine goals as a whole. We want the goal to inform the path, and then we want to let go of the number. And that might feel counterintuitive in such a goal-focused and goal-oriented environment that we tend to be in real estate, and not just in real estate. I know there's a few people here on the webinar today that are not in the real estate realm. And I would say when you're operating in a high performing environment, we can get really attached to the outcome, but I want to address a more sustainable way to get to that same outcome. And then we're going to talk about becoming versus doing. So we want to focus on becoming the person that you want to be and not necessarily the achievement. The achievement will be a byproduct of you transforming into that version of yourself. And then we need to talk about what's going on inside of our heads with all of this. And so we're going to rewrite the narrative. Your agents want it. They just might not know how to get there yet. And so I want to address that conversation that a lot of us have as leaders on our agents not wanting things bad enough. So let's redefine the concept of goals. The goal is a tool. It's a tool. It's not a strategy. The goal informs the path, but it isn't the path. So what do I mean by that? The goal to me is sort of like a beacon. And what I think goals have this unintentional byproduct of is creating ceilings or limitations around what we can actually achieve. And I like to kind of talk about this story of where I was before I got into real estate. I was running restaurants and I loved working in the restaurant industry. I was in the restaurant industry for 15 years before I got into real estate. And my version of my best self at that time was someone that was still an employee, that was being the general manager, which was fun, but it had a very, very low ceiling for income and a very, very low quality of life. I was working 70-hour work weeks. I had one day off every 2 weeks. And for me, at that time, that was my highest and best. That's what I thought my highest and best was. So my goals were diminished significantly to my potential because at that time, I didn't have the resources, I didn't have the environment, I didn't have the people pouring into me for me to even conceptualize the version of myself that I could be, truly even 5 years from now. And at that time, it really didn't take 5 years for me to start to realize my potential. I happened to go way beyond my potential in 5 years, but it only took a year or two for me to take the lid off of myself and to allow myself to think bigger. And so to me, a goal is something that informs the path, but a goal is allowed to evolve. A goal is allowed to change according to the circumstances of your life. Many of you as business owners have had one vision, but as you grew as a leader and as a business owner and an entrepreneur, you were able to expand that goal beyond of something that you might have been able to conceptualize prior to actually getting on the path. And so we should use goals as a way to get us on the right track, but we shouldn't be so attached to them that they actually cause us to play smaller. And that leads into detaching from the outcome. We have this driving force to attach to how something should feel or how something should be. And if you can learn how to detach from the outcome and then just get really clear on the daily showing up, when you're clear on what you're working towards, you can start to let the rest go. And if you can release that need for it to look or feel a certain way, what you'll do is have a much more enjoyable experience with the process. And we're going to talk about the process at length today. So getting hyper focused on the process means that you're going to shift your focus to the daily steps and measure that meticulously. I'm hoping you've read books like, 10X, where it really dives into prioritizing lead measures. And any business owner worth their salt understands that you have to prioritize lead measures for you to get to your bigger outcomes. But we have a sometimes toxic relationship with the process where we get heavily attached to what the goal should be, what it should feel like, what it should look like. And we play that game of feast or famine and peaks or valleys where you're inside of this vicious cycle where you're constantly going for intensity over consistency. And that is exhausting. And I promise you right now that it has an expiration date. You need to be able to stay consistent to the process versus constantly worrying about output on the back end. All right, so become versus do. This is where we're going to get a little bit deeper here. And I need to remind you that you included, as well as your agents, are human beings first. We are human beings before we are human doings. And this is so important to humanize the people that you're working with and even to humanize yourself, because it is going to set you up for something we'll talk about here in a little bit, for empathy and compassion, which are required for you to be able to see agents, to meet you where they're at, and for you guys to meet each other where you're at and to collaborate. So we have to be the version of ourselves that we want to be now before we can do the things that person would do and have the things that that person would have. So let me unpack that. You have to start to shift your vision of yourself, and then also be able to teach this to your agents how to embody their future now. You have to shift the perspective from what do I have to do to who do I have to be. We typically try to follow the process where if I go do the things that person would do, then I would have the things that that person would have, and then I would be the person that I want to be. And this is actually completely backwards. You have to start being that person now. You have to start putting your thoughts through the filter of the version of the person that you want to be. So would a healthy person eat that? Would a wealthy person spend money on that? Would a healthy person not get up to go for their walk this morning or not get their workout in? You have to start cultivating a new filter for the person that I want to be. What would they do? And that's how you start to embody the future version of yourself now. As a byproduct of that process, of that behavior, and changing the way that you think about the version you want to be, you will start to do the things that that person would do. And therefore you would start to have the things that that person would have. And again, this would be a much more enjoyable experience. So you have to act first, and then receiving is going to come after. So now that we've addressed become versus do, let's talk about the narrative that shows up, because whenever we're changing behaviors or patterns, there will be resistance. And I'm going to do a little bit of a deeper dive on resistance with you guys today. But the first thing we need to become aware of is that there is a narrative. So we need to first have an awareness around that narrative. I have to first identify the stories that show up when my agents are encountering resistance. So sometimes we look at this as it's an excuse, and you're not totally wrong. But I would say that the intentions are a little bit different. We are always going to strive for connection. We're hardwired for connection, which means that we also have a drive to look good and be right. And it's not because we're necessarily egomaniacs. This is more of a survival technique than anything. And so that means that people will want to save face, and that becomes a survival technique. So something may be an excuse, but if someone is put in a position where they're being questioned or where they are, being held accountable, which we'll talk about as well, oftentimes what's happening is the parasympathetic nervous system engages and they go into flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. And knowing that there's a physiological response happening means that also you can expect that there will be narratives that accompany that response. So if someone is giving you an excuse around something, there's most likely some version of an unmet need behind that behavior, because behavior is really nothing more than communicating a need. And so your agents may not be able to articulate this. In fact, many of you may struggle to articulate what you need. So When they have that story, when the brain creates resistance, it's essentially just trying to conserve energy so it doesn't have to create a new neural pathway. That's what's happening in the brain. And so it can manifest as a narrative. So when your agents are struggling to show up, or they get into kind of that freeze state, or they're not able to, do the things that they're supposed to do, I want to know what they're telling themselves in their head. I want to know what the story is. And I'm going to start practicing with them awareness. Then I'm going to reflect. I want to notice what's causing those specific behaviors. And then I need to be prepared to repeat myself. I think Matt Smith might be on here today. And I brought this up when I saw him in Tahoe. And I thought it was just like the most beautiful, simple way to say this. If you didn't say it 7 times, it basically didn't get said at all. And I coach with team owners every single day. And this is one of the most common frustrations that I hear, that like, I shouldn't have to repeat myself. And I get this, I understand the sentiment and I understand the logic behind that. But I also think that a strong leader understands that they will have to repeat themselves pretty much constantly. And that can feel infuriating, because usually as a high performer, high achiever, where a majority of our team owners are existing inside of, is that team owner, or that high performance box. We have very little patience for other people not understanding it or getting it. And so we kind of look at everyone else like they should be on our level. And I like to remind leaders that you're running a different race. You're not on the same racetrack. And so if you think you're lapping them, that's not actually what's happening. You're actually you're running with the studs, okay, on the racetrack. You're not on the same racetrack. So you will have to repeat yourself, and especially because there is physiological response happening, where it is something that it's just their programming being triggered and executing on that trigger. And so you can help them reprogram that by compassionately repeating yourself when they have those specific behaviors and getting curious. And then we want to start to change the story. One thing that I think I've had a lot of success in with working with agents is and team owners alike. I did this with my team owners the other day. I will redirect your narrative. If I hear you self-deprecate, if I hear you talk badly about yourself, or say that, I suck at this, we will immediately pause and reframe that. Let's find another way to say that. Because what that narrative does, of when you're having that negative narrative and you're reinforcing that, you give your brain a job to scan your environment to go find more evidence of that thing being true. So we need to help them change the story so that we can reframe the way they look at the world, and then we'll eventually change the narrative. Now, this is very surface level of going deep on, like, the way that our brain creates resistance through narratives and listening to the mind, and we're not our thoughts. But this is where we start. One day, maybe we'll go super deep on this, but this is where we start. Get them aware, help them reflect, and then change the story. Reinforce what you want them to believe about themselves and their abilities. Okay, so now that we've talked about the mindset piece, let's talk about the process. There are 2 things that I think are really important about the process. There are many things we could talk about, but there are 2 I'm going to address today. Number 1 is high standards, high compassion. I'm pretty sure this is going to be my new motto, because I think it sums up exactly how we have to show up as leaders. I can absolutely have high standards, and I need to do that through high compassion. So leading requires both boundaries and empathy. And then we're going to talk about one of my favorite things to talk about, which is the emotional life cycle of a goal. And I'm going to teach you guys how to commit to the process, because it's a lot easier than we understand. So high standards, high compassion. Boundaries require clarity. So the first thing as a leader, or even if you're just an agent on this call right now, you have to know what is okay with you and what is not okay with you. And then we have to have your actions align with that. That's how we hold a boundary. When we don't hold boundaries, it teaches people to not respect us. Because what we have subconsciously communicated to them is, I don't respect myself enough to hold this boundary. So it's a little odd that we would expect anyone else to hold it for us. No one can hold our boundaries for us. Although, my fellow people pleasers, I know there are some of us that try to do that, which is an abandonment of our own boundaries. Okay. Another conversation for a different day. But you can't hold a boundary if you don't know what it is. And you also have to practice holding that boundary. So here's an example that I get all the time. Team leaders were inundated with gotta minutes. Okay, I think that's one of the first things that I typically end up having to help solve in a coaching call is, I'm buried by the gotta minutes. And so my usual response is, okay, you're struggling to hold a boundary. So why don't we try something that doesn't exactly have to be a hard no, or where we're being very rigid and shutting people out, which is not going to foster connection. And I still need to be able, as the leader, to do what I need to do and hold a boundary. So I recommend the yes and here's when, yes and here's how, yes and here's who. An agent approaches you during lead generation and they say, hey, do you got a minute? You can say, yes, I do, and here's when. At 11:01, I've got a minute. That's holding a boundary, but you're still operating through the filter of compassion. Connection can still occur. And what is also happening as a byproduct of you holding the boundary is that you have invited them to respect you more. And then that is going to be required for them to follow you and your as a leader, is that they need to be able to respect you. So you have to hold the boundary. You also have to give them the opportunity. So I like to operate through the filter of making a generous assumption that they truly do want it, and then I want to stay connected to them. I've lost count of the amount of times I've heard a team owner say they just don't want it. And I'd like to address that here for a second, because I'm not saying that that's never true. I'm saying that that's mostly not true. Real estate is a tough gig, okay? It's 100% commission. We all know this. Painfully, we know this. Most of us have been through the pain points of building your business. Very few agents start off with a 6-month nest egg to get their business building, okay? We understand that there is it's a very stressful period in the ramp up of getting an agent into production and then getting an agent to sustain production. Most people have been employees their entire lives. They did not start off as business owners, and they don't necessarily understand the inner workings of the business. We can make an argument that it's their responsibility to understand, but I think that it's kind of a moot point. They're here, they want to work, and they want to see something change in their lives, and they're done being an employee, and they'd like to not have to go back to work, although some will default to that because of their programming and their sense of stability. But with that being said, I don't think that anyone is showing up to that level of risk without really wanting it. So I want to make a generous assumption that they really do want it. And it's just more likely that they have really underestimated what it would take for them to get to where they want to go and to have financial security. Financial security is one of our top needs. And you understand, because you've been through this as well, that when you're not financially stable, it amplifies every other issue in your life to a very high level. So there's a massive amount of emotional dysregulation occurring. And when we're emotionally dysregulated, this is something else that, by the way, most of us have not been given tools on how to regulate ourselves. Do you know how to regulate yourself? Do you have a set of tools that you can go to regulate yourself? There's probably a handful of you that do, but most of us are just like, maybe breathe, we aren't necessarily taught how to regulate ourselves in states of dysregulation, which is going to cause unwanted behaviors because there's a need not being met. And so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they truly want it. And I'm just going to meet them where they're at and try to identify the gap that they're having. So I'm going to come to them with curiosity in our conversations when they're not showing up. When I was a productivity coach at my first market center, my only market center, we had 5 agents when we started, and in under a year, we built this to over 180 agents with over 60% of them in production. And one of the things that was really challenging for most productivity coaches out there, and I hear this with team leaders as well, is, I can't get them to show up. And so, and I faced that right away. That was one of the first things I faced, was that I couldn't get agents to show up. And so I just started getting really curious. I had a list of my roster. It was 5 in the beginning, and then it was 11, and then it just boomed. And then every morning I would have 50 or 60 people on my morning calls at 8 a.m. and we would do scripting and mindset. And we would do affirmations, and we would do goals, and we cultivated energy. But I actually think the reason that people consistently showed up is because I let them know that I cared that they were there. So if they weren't there, I would say, hey, I noticed you weren't on the call today. Is everything okay? And usually they'd give me like, hey, something was going on. I said, great, well, I'm excited to see you tomorrow. And if they didn't show up the next day, I'd say, hey, I noticed you weren't on the call again today. Do you need some support from me? I would just continually come from curiosity, and I would suspend my need for my ego to be at play, to be passive aggressive or to be facetious with them, where I'm trying to make them feel dumb for not doing something they said they would do, which is sometimes how we feel like we are supposed to deliver accountability. I would just be very graciously curious. And if it continued on, 3 or 4 times and then maybe they were ghosting me, or maybe they were not answering, or they were answering and giving me more excuses, then I would hold the standard, okay? And I can lead with compassion here as well, because I also think that we cannot love people into failure. Oftentimes as leaders, we kind of fall into two camps. We want to be the mommy or the mentor, and they really need a leader. There's this special place in between where there's some harmony between these two parts, but really instead of it being about you nurturing or you showing them how great you are, you show up in service to them. As a leader, that's what we do as leaders. We're in service to the people that we lead. And so I would hold the standard. Hey, something that is a standard in our group is that you have to show up to our morning meetings, or you've got to show up to the coaching calls, or I pull you from the roster. And if that's what you need to do, I'm totally fine with that. But would you be willing to communicate that to me? And usually it would open up a bigger conversation, and we could either figure out a plan forward or we would part ways. And so it's okay for us to hold the standard, but I'm always going to go through the filter of compassion. And the reason that this is so important is because I fundamentally understand the process that they're going through. And so that's what the emotional life cycle of a goal is. It's one of the harder things that people will experience once they understand they're in the emotional life cycle of a goal. And I'm going to show you guys what that process looks like here in a second. And we'll see that many people get trapped in one pattern inside of there. And so when we're going through the emotional life cycle of a goal, if we want to get from where we're at to where we intend to go, the only way out is through. There's really no way to mitigate the process. And so as a leader, you need to buckle up and lean in, because it's going to be bumpy. I need to manage their expectations. I need to prepare them for feelings of discomfort, frustration, and anger throughout the process. And I need to give them permission to feel those things and to allow those things to show up. And then as a leader, I've got to be willing to lead them through that. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't hold my own emotional boundaries. There are some things I will not engage with when it comes to my clients, because I'm not a therapist, okay? And I will never claim to be a therapist. It doesn't mean we don't talk about personal things, but when things get to a certain point, that's when I say, maybe we should talk about therapy. Maybe you should see a counselor. I can still hold my boundaries and not take things too far, because then we start to cross into the mommy territory where we're wanting to nurture. And sometimes, and that's usually where I will see people accidentally and unintentionally love their people into failure. So I'm going to say you can feel all these things. I call it the 5-second funeral. Feel your feelings and then move on. Acknowledge what is showing up. I'm willing to be a sounding board for you on that, but then we're going to be done with that for a minute, and we're going to figure out a way to create some action so that you can actually go through the process. And when you do get to the end of the emotional life cycle of a goal, it never ends. The process repeats itself over and over and over again as you continue to level up. And so let me show you what that looks like. If you've ever done a training or a coaching with me before, you've probably seen this. This is my favorite graphic, and I did hand swoop this. I'm very proud of it. In the emotional life cycle of a goal, we all start at uninformed optimism. And I'm going to give you guys a flyby version of this today, because we only have so much time together. And by the way, if you guys have questions or comments, put them in the chat, because I want to interact with you guys. We all start here at uninformed optimism. So when an agent walks into your office to do their goal setting with you, and they're going to say $100,000 is my goal, and they may or may not be emotionally connected to that. And little side quest here, but I personally don't subscribe to the why. I think that it has a time and a place, and it can be used as a strategy, but we are typically not motivated by things we want. We're usually motivated by things we don't want. So there's a side quest for that, but we're all starting in uninformed optimism, meaning that we have all of the enthusiasm, but none of the context yet. We know all of the things we want to achieve. We're visualizing them. We're starting to create an emotional attachment to how it's supposed to feel, what it's supposed to look like. What will I do with this version of myself when I achieve it? That's uninformed optimism. All of the enthusiasm, none of the context. when you start taking steps in the right direction, so let's take real estate, for example. I'm showing up to my lead generation. I'm doing the role plays. I'm entering my numbers. You've got a star student for the first 2 weeks, and then they start falling off. I just know that the majority of us are operating inside of that intensity over consistency programming. And this process is going to require you to shift that. But your agents immediately are usually going through this enthusiastic upfront part where they are, doing the work and they're going through the motions, and it's like, man, I got a good feeling about this one. And then sometimes there's this drop. Well, what happens is they shifted into informed pessimism. And this is where context sets in. Man, I thought getting 20 conversations a day would be easy. I'm exhausted. Or they start skipping lead generation altogether and they start hiding from the team meetings and they're not answering, your text messages, and you're having to have a little come to Jesus meeting with them. They're most likely in informed pessimism. And this is where we get stuck. This is where a lot of people get stuck, is they started uninformed optimism, they move to informed pessimism, they repeat. Uninformed optimism, informed pessimism, repeat over and over and over again. And all that's happening right now is that their tolerance for the threshold of discomfort that shows up in those initial stages is just low. This can be reconditioned through action and repetition. And that's why I personally subscribe to 1% better and master the art of showing up, and not giving these like massive, like you need to achieve all these things in the beginning. I'd rather scale them into the behaviors so that they're actually creating a new neural pathway around it, because they're just more likely to be able to sustain it if they are given the opportunity for their neurons to fire and wire, the brain create resistance, and then they can take small steps to start breaking through that resistance. And that repetition of showing up will actually help to develop a new neural pathway. And when that new neural pathway has been established, we've created a more subconscious reflexive behavior, and we won't need to use self-discipline and willpower and motivation as a strategy. We can use it more as a resource and a tool, and we'll have less of this valley of despair, or these peaks and valleys in their business and in their life. So when an agent gets to informed pessimism, I know that if they can break through that, if they can just keep showing up through the informed pessimism, that they will then get at what's next, called the valley of despair. When I had my coaching program, it was like clockwork. I started noticing, like, agents would come in and they'd be in tears. Mia, I'm showing up every day. I'm doing the work. I'm making these calls. I'm getting my ass kicked by sell-by owners and expireds, and I don't want to call my sphere, and nothing is working. And I would talk them off the ledge, and then boom, everything would pop. And it was 6 to 8 weeks. I started paying attention to how much time it would take. And within 6 to 8 weeks, and almost always it's right on the money of week 7, they are going to have a breakdown. If they're showing up consistently and they're doing the work, they're going to have a breakdown because they're putting in all this work and they're not getting any of the reward out of it yet. And the valley of despair is this moment where you're so frustrated and you're so angry. All you want to do is quit. You can't see the light. You don't think it's going to be possible. You feel like you've given everything you've got left to give, and you're just ready to be done. Sometimes this sounds like, I'm going to go to another brokerage. I'm going to go to another team. I'm going to get a job. I'm just going to take a break for a little while. You got to talk them off the ledge here. And I always want people to have ownership in their decisions. That's really, really important for collaboration, is that they own that sense of autonomy in their decision. And so I use good questions to get them there. Well, tell me, what makes you think that you're not going to get there? And how do you know that's 100% true? And just walking them through the conversation. If they can just keep going after that moment, if they can get right back into action, which now on my syllabus, like my syllabi, like all of my training, week 7, it's on the curriculum. Like, I already know, like we're going to have a tough time week 7. I give them the day. I want you to go take 2 hours and do just something that fills your tank. Okay. We're going to do no work today. And tomorrow I want you to come back and show up ready to go and get right back into the activity, because now is the moment for you to keep going. This is the moment. It's right around the corner. I promise you. And like clockwork, when they would keep showing up, boom, the business would pop. Many of those agents that I coached with in my productivity coaching program are in the top 20% of their market center still to this day. And it's because they built on a solid foundation of failure and keeping and continuing to move forward, and failure and continuing to move forward. Give them space to fail and allow them to feel what shows up in there, and then support them and reinforcing a narrative that they can absolutely do this. If they can keep going after the valley of despair, which some will not, some will go back to uninformed optimism and they will take this ride again. But many will, and many will get to what's informed optimism, and that's the stride. Oh, I got a listing appointment. Oh, I'm showing a buyer today. Oh, I got another signed agreement. And then it starts getting sporadic, and then it starts getting consistent. If in the informed optimism stage, you can keep them focused on the lead measures. Because if not, they're going to go right back to uninformed optimism if they stop doing the lead measures that got them there. But informed optimism is the stride. And when they catch the stride, that's where the momentum starts happening for them to get to joy and fulfillment. As a business owner, many of you have been through this process before, and I'm sure you're looking back right now and seeing this happen in your life previously, especially if you're a team owner that has built something pretty big. You've seen those moments where you're like, what am I doing? Why am I still doing this? I should just go get a job. I could work at the bank again. If you can get to joy and fulfillment, the next thing, if you're committed to leveling up, the next thing that happens is you go right back to uninformed optimism, and you go through this process again. But over time, you start learning how to lean into the process and getting comfortable with the process and then enjoying the process. And I equate this to like lifting a pair of dumbbells. When I first started working out again, 25 pounds was really, really heavy for me. I wasn't able to do more than one or two. But I just kept working at it. I kept going to failure. I kept going to failure. I kept going to failure. And now 25 pounds is easier for me. 25 pounds still weighs 25 pounds. Okay. Which is really 50 because obviously I've got one in both hands. It's still the same weight. Okay. It's not any less heavy. I'm stronger. I'm a better version of myself. I've evolved and I've strengthened myself to be able to lift that weight more easily. It's the same concept when you're going through the process of the emotional life cycle of a goal. It's heavy in the beginning until you get strong enough to lift it, and you keep doing it over and over again, and you can lift more weight. This is on page 72 in the emotion, or in the 12-week year. If you ever want to go back and learn more about it, it's really good. All right. So the last thing here we need to talk about is the execution. So I want to touch on collaboration and connection, because that's what's going to help you guys move from me against you to us against the problem as a team owner and agent. And we're going to talk about how we embrace the process and meeting your agents where they're at and letting them fail forward. And then clarity will be required here. And so both you and your agents need to stay focused on the 1%. So what does this look like? Getting to collaboration and connection. I told you about this before. I'm going to go a little bit deeper on this now. Getting curious. I operate through the filter, and some people disagree with me here because sometimes they have a hard time being compassionate with themselves. I 100%, without a shadow of a doubt, believe that every single one of us, including you, is doing the very best you can at any given moment. And what makes this such a conflict for some of us high performers and leaders is we look at someone and we say, but your potential, I know what you're capable of. And it's just so frustrating that you won't step into your potential. And that's more about you than it is about them. Unfortunately, you cannot want it more than anybody else. That would be our ego. You just cannot want it more than someone else. You can't. And if you think you do, it is your ego. That's more about you and what their failure means to you than it is what it means to them. And if you can remove yourself from that part of the equation, you'll see that, man, I have plenty of days where I feel like I didn't do enough. And I know I really gave it my all. Or I feel like I didn't give anywhere near what I could have given today. And I didn't show up the way I wanted to. And I know I'm not operating at the level I should be. And you're not very compassionate about you gave exactly what you had to give that day. I'm not saying, don't hear me say, this is permission for people to not step into their greatness, because that's not what I'm saying. This is how we meet people where they're at. And that's how you move people into action, is meeting them where they're at. So I'm believing that they're doing the best they can in that moment, and I'm going to get curious about their needs. I'm going to get curious about their needs. I'm not coddling, okay? I'm not loving them into failure. I am meeting them where they're at. I'm figuring out what they need, and I'm going to give them the tools to give themselves what they need. It's not me saying, you know what, why don't I give you a few more leads? Or, I'll let you, split this buyer with me. No. Hey, I get that you're struggling to show up right now. I'm going to be in the office tomorrow at 9 a.m. Do you want a partner to show up with? You show up at 9 a.m. and we'll just get a few calls in. Okay. I can meet them where they're at there. And so I need to shift from me against them to us against the problem. You can't talk people out of how they feel. So instead you have to collaborate with them. So here's an example that I like to facetiously say. Your significant other might get a little bit worked up in the heat of the moment of an argument, okay? Maybe they get a little angry, maybe they get emotional, and objectively, as tensions rise, and you're feeling calmer, you might say, and this could objectively be true, you might say, I think we need to calm down. That's not going to work very well, is it? No. Your attempt to use logic in an emotional space is going to be fruitless. And the reason being is when we are emotionally dysregulated, our prefrontal cortex shuts off. Logic is not available in that moment. We are emotion first beings. I have a 2-year-old toddler. There is no logic yet. His prefrontal cortex hasn't even started developing. And when it does, it won't fully develop until he's 25. So we spend or in mid 20s, we spend the majority of our life in an emotion first state. We always go to emotion first. John always says this, and I love it. He says the heart decides, the mind justifies. You've also heard it if you've ever been to Keller Williams Bold. Emotions make us act, logic makes us think. We are emotion first creatures. It's how we're hardwired. Even the most pragmatic of you out there and logical of you out there, you make every decision through emotion first before it ever becomes logical. And so we have to realize that when someone is emotionally dysregulated, logic is not going to be the way to get them into action. I've got to meet them where they're at emotionally first. And now this doesn't mean that I get like so empathetic that I take on their emotions with me and abandon boundaries of my own. Instead, I just try to validate what they're going through. So this is something that if you're a new age parent like me, and you guys have learned about all of the, the stuff that comes out around raising your kid these days. But this works with adults. Okay. Acknowledge what they're experiencing, validate it. It's the same way that I teach agents to handle objections. I repeat it, I affirm it, I move on. Okay. You're really frustrated that your business isn't going the way that it wants to. That's hard. Repeat it, repeat back to them, validate it, affirm it, and then move on. You're having a hard time showing up because you feel like you can't be consistent. I understand how frustrating that is. Repeat it, affirm it, move on. I can get on their side by, instead of it being me against you, it's me against the problem, or us against the problem. So instead of me saying, you don't do this and you don't show up and this is attack, attack, attack. Great. We've engaged the nervous system. Now they're in flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. And the prefrontal cortex is shut off and you are no longer going to be able to access them from a logical space. So now I've got to meet them where the emotion is, and then we can talk logic afterwards after they've regulated and calmed down. So a way that you hold space as a team owner or as a team leader is you acknowledge what they're experiencing, you affirm it, and then you start to walk them through logic and you make it about how can we solve this? All right, we know that we have to lead generate every day. We know that showing up to lead generation is the only way we move our business forward. What does support look like here so that you show up every day? That's us against the problem. And then that's how I return ownership to them. So I want to hold space for them to step into their power, and I want to make it about them, not me. All right. Sometimes as team owners, we think, just watch what I'm doing, and that's an effective tutorial. It's not that effective, and it can actually be a little bit demeaning and dismissive if we don't actually meet them and teach them. And so I want to hold space for them. So holding space is, again, that validation portion, and then giving them the tools to do the work. I know you've got leads that you can call, and I've got them assigned to you. Tomorrow morning, let's show up at 9 a.m. and you start making some calls, and I'll be right there with you. Okay. Okay. And then the process, anticipate turbulence. We already talked about this in the emotional life cycle of a goal. In the beginning, enthusiasm can fuel us until it doesn't. So once we get into informed pessimism, that enthusiasm died flat on its face. And now we need to anticipate turbulence. And now I also have to align my expectations to reality. I want our agents to build from consistency, not intensity. So I'm going to focus on the showing up part. Yes, I would love for them to be hitting all of the goals. I'd love for them to be getting their, 5 to 7 2-minute conversations a day, which now might be is closer to 10 2-minute conversations a day. And I'd love for them to begin their role play. And I'd love for them to be showing up. All of those things I want and I trust will happen, but I just need to get them to show up first and get really good at showing up first. James Clear talks about this in Atomic Habits. It feels like it's not enough, but the compound interest of the activities will lead to a bigger outcome. But for high performers, we have a very low tolerance in the beginning of that process of watching other people go too slow. So watch that. And then make it your motto. Keep the lead measures in front of them constantly, constantly. If you're not bringing it up over and over and over again, what you've subconsciously communicated to them is, I know you said it, I've said this once, but it's really not that important to me. So every team meeting and every one-on-one, go right to the lead measures. All right, let's talk about our 20-minute conversations. Let's talk about our consultations. Let's talk about our signed agreements. Every training I do, we talk about numbers, every single one. And we go over and we celebrate the wins. We don't acknowledge the zeros. We don't celebrate the failure. We don't acknowledge the failures because it has a much more toxic impact on the overall culture and energy. We just celebrate the wins and people start rising with the tide or falling off. And that's also okay. All right. And then last piece here, clarity required. I need to identify what I want to measure. Are they totally clear on what's expected of them? And not because you said it once. Where is it posted? How do they know? Can they actually reiterate that to you? Are you checking in to see if they're actually following through with it? Are they clear on how it goes? Guys, I work with hundreds of agents all day. And I give some very simple steps on like, okay, submit this form here and then give us the cumulative. I add in extra instructions. I've got 8 places to find it. And there will always be a handful of people that are like, what do I do? I don't get mad at that. In fact, I prepare people on our first call. You're going to hear someone ask the same question 50 times. And if you're a high D, go to your happy place like Happy Gilmore, because it's going to be like nails on a chalkboard when I graciously answer the question, because the human brain can only retain so much information. That's all it is. And there's a massive amount of information coming in, not just from training, but from onboarding or what's expected of them from their board, and then fear of not having money and stuff that's going on at home and all these other areas of their life. And so I just know that like I'm gonna have to repeat myself. And so I'm gonna make sure that I ask questions to know that they're clear on it. And so I want to communicate that clearly. I want to break it down daily. Here's how we win today, everyone. We're gonna get our 7 2-minute conversations. Everyone's gonna get a one-on-one role play. What's your plan? Okay. We did this in like the morning calls I did. We had, give me your goal and your affirmation. I do goals and affirmations every day. What is the thing you're focusing on today? What's your plan? And what are you affirming is going to happen in your life? Because we're trying to program their brain to scan their environment for more evidence of that thing. And then I need to make it obvious. So I need to align the environment, the systems, and the structure to everything that I expect of them. So is it on do you have it posted on the wall somewhere? Do they know like exactly what they should be looking at every day? Do the systems match the expectations? Do they know how to work the systems? Does the structure of how to work the systems align with the expectation? If you have a goal for them to hit a certain amount of conversations every day, but you don't have a way to fact check that, and you don't have a simple way for them to access it, your systems and structure need some improving. Okay, so I told you I'd give you guys some tactics, and I'm like really pleased with my timing here. Good job, Mia. We are going to talk about tools and tactics on how to actually run through the goal setting process. And I'm going to give you guys a very basic structure. The reason I'm giving you guys a very basic structure is because I don't think that there's any perfect way to put together somebody's goals. I think like there's so many good ways to do it. It's just actually a matter that you're spending time with them on it, and we're going back to it regularly. My one-on-one coaching clients, we look at their, I give them like a portal with their goals. We go back to it at least every other week. It's scheduled. Like we're constantly looking at the goals. So there's 5 parts I want you to focus on. You can split this into 6, but I've got it down to 5 parts to coach to the whole person. In the very beginning, we talked about humanizing them and how important this was. When you can talk to them as a whole person and they feel like you see them as a whole person, you're going to get way more collaboration. Then we're going to chunk it down and revisit it monthly. And then we're going to break it out and allocate weekly. Let me just do a quick check here. Oh, cool. Oh, my mom's here. Hi, mom. That's awesome. So there's 5 parts that we want to focus on as the whole person. Number 1 is career or their professional self. Number 2 is physical. Number 3 is relationships, family and social. Number 4 is wealth. And number 5 is spiritual. These are the kind of 5 main parts of the person, we could say. I'm not saying there's not nuance in other things, but if we can address these 5 things, we're going to get pretty far with them. So, in their career and physical or their career self, I like to focus on like unit goals, professional goals, maybe like if they're trying to work towards a sales director role, if they're trying to work into an ops manager role, you can do this with your ops team as well, not just your agents. What are the things that are specific to their job goals that they want to achieve? I would put GCI here. For wealth, I typically put things that will make money without them needing to be there necessarily. There's usually a buildup, obviously, but like, investment properties, diversifying their portfolio, paying down debt. That's usually what I put in the wealth category. I would still put GCI in the career category. For their physical self, I like to address the whole person. Oftentimes people will put weight goals in here, and I just like to help them reframe that a little bit. Instead of making it about how much weight they want to lose, I want to look at like, okay, what is that version of that person that you want to be? Is it that you want to be a certain size? Is it you want to feel a certain way? And so I want to get a little bit clearer on what do you mean by like lose X pounds? Like what would that do for you? For relationships, social, meaning their relationships with their friends, community, how they interact with their community, and then family, if they have a significant other, spouse, or children. All of those things would be embodied here in the relationships portion. Wealth, like I mentioned, are things that are going to create long-term wealth. And then spiritual. Spiritual can mean prayer, devotions, ritual. It could also mean meditation. It's not religious necessarily. And so we all have a spiritual side. And so addressing like, okay, maybe it's meditation for you, or maybe it's reading your devotions every day, or maybe it's going to church every Sunday. What does spiritual mean to you? I recommend annually having 3 or 4 goals in each of these categories, but you pick 2 out of these 5 that are going to get the majority of your time and intention. And the other 3 we're going to scale the goal down pretty low. So if your 2 main focuses are career and physical this year, your relationships, wealth, and spiritual will be things that you're just moving the needle forward on. So you would put the really big goals in career and physical, but let's say for relationships, it's okay, have a date night once a week instead of, take 4 vacations with my spouse this year. And so, which would be totally awesome. But if you're going to do career and physical as your main ones, that's where the big goals need to go. And then help them scale these back, because we have this need to try and make everything like a lot bigger. And it's just unlikely that they're really going to be able to get to all of those things. And then this just becomes a place for them to feel shame and failure. Instead, just get them hyper-focused on the things that they can achieve within the next year. And this is 12 months out. I will be sending you guys these. This is just how I do it. And I don't necessarily think it's the best way, but it's a way that works really well for me and my brain. On the far left side here, we've got the annual goals. And as you can see, there's 4 placements here for each goal. And then I personally break these down month by month. And I do this in my notebook because I like to write things down. But I've given you guys a version of my notebook here on the in a worksheet where I will pull from these goals and I'll pick 4 things I want to work on that month. And then I'll pull them down into the week version. So I will go through once a month in my little notebook there. I'll look at my career goals and I'll start breaking things down for the week of, 1 through 7 and then 8 through 15 and so on. And I'll pull from each category one thing that I can work towards that month. And then the far right side, this is how I prioritize my day-to-day. It's not the only way. And I do have some strategies and tactics on making this completely digital, which a lot of people like, but most people prefer writing. I don't think it's the most efficient way, but it's there. So this is the same exact format that I use in my notebook. I've just put it here in a worksheet for you. I have my top priorities for the week. They're highlighted based on what I'm doing that day. And these are the most important tasks that I need to take care of. These are my top priorities, AKA your 20%. but I don't like to crowd that up with like my daily and weekly tasks. So instead, what I do is I have like everything I want to do every day, Monday through Sunday, and I write those down. And then I have everything I want to do that's like once or twice a week. I put those down here under the weekly task and I check those off as I go, which for the weekly tasks, that's my newsletter, doing a podcast, writing 10 pages for the book, doing an agent celebration. Those are things I want to achieve once a week. My daily priorities are like putting a video on Facebook, doing something on Instagram. And so I'm checking off if I'm getting those with an X. If I missed it, a check mark if I did it. And then the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see that it says like notes and to do. Those are like little tasks that randomly came up that I can quickly check off, or just any notes that I had for the week. So you guys will get access to this. And I said I had a surprise here at the end, and I am like killing it with time right now. Great job, Mia. I had a surprise at the end. We've never done anything like this before, but I'm really excited. We're getting ready to launch something called the 77 harder. You might have heard the 75 hard or the 76 hard, but we're going with the 77 harder. And we're actually opening this up to all of you guys to join our Reside community for this 77-day challenge. It starts on the 16th of October and it will end on December 31st. It's free. There's no catch. This is just a way for us to build a relationship with you. And so what you'll get with this is I will put together a playbook. I've put together a playbook for your team, or if you're an individual agent, we have that as well. We'll give you weekly motivational videos that will text directly to you from our team. I also will have marketing templates for social media where you can post like day 1 nailed it, day 2 nailed it, and so forth. And then you're also going to get a weekly group check-in with me via Zoom and with our team. So it'll mostly be me, but every now and again, we'll rotate some of our team in, and you'll be invited just to show up weekly, and I'll just check in and see how you're doing so far. It's just a way for us to connect. And then I'll give you a prescription of 7 daily activities for both agents and team owners. So it'll be things like have 7 2-minute conversations a day, or text 7 hot prospects, things like that. 7 activities you'll do every day, including Saturday and Sunday, to finish the year strong. So you set up for Q1 in 2025. I'm hoping that this is the right QR code. It's looking good because I updated it literally at the last second. But this is the sign up for to register. This is the QR code. I'll make sure this gets sent out in a recap as well if for some reason you're missing it. Sign up deadline is next Wednesday or next Tuesday, the 15th. I think it's Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. If you're a solo agent, if you're a team owner, if you're a team agent, or if you are other, you can allocate there, and then that'll determine the playbook I send out to you. Those will be sent out tomorrow by end of day. We're just going to be waiting for people to get registered, and then I'll send them as we get registrations in. Here they come. All right. And then lastly, I want to talk about our next webinar on November 7th. Y'all, Sanit is such a badass. He's so good at what he does. And he's going to be talking to you guys about lead domination. He's going to give you the 4 proven strategies that every realtor needs. And so if you guys don't know anything about Sanit, he's the #1 real estate team leader in Sacramento. He's a nationally recognized real estate coach. And he's going to take you guys through the 4-part proven system that he uses to help agents dominate their markets. So there's the website address for that. But I also have a QR code for you. So that'll be at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern on November 7th. Don't miss it, because Sanit is a killer trainer. Okay, I would love to take some questions if you guys have it. Quick speaking to keep on time. You've done a great job. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm just going through the chat here. It is recorded. Yes, recorded. Thank you, Raja. Thank you, Courtney. Thanks, Mom. And awesome. Good. And I don't see any questions. You guys, this is your opportunity to ask some questions if you have them. I'll stay on for a few minutes to answer any questions you guys might have. Yeah, a little information on the 77 hard. Yeah, so you'll be doing, hi Kim, I love you. So we'll be doing, if you're a team owner, you'll dial 7 recruits a day. Hey Josh, so good to see you. Josh was one of my coaching clients in the productivity coaching program from all those years ago. So cool to see you, dude. Yeah, well, so we'll be doing writing a CMA a day. You'll be calling like 7 recruits or 7 prospects, texting, posting on social media. Thank you, Phil. Good to see you, sir. It's all very doable stuff. It would definitely be harder at you guys being at EXPCon for 5 days, but it's not impossible. It's just stuff that you're a lot of the stuff it's stuff you'll be doing already. There's a few things that will be added on. So you will need to allocate probably an additional hour, hour and a half a day to like knock those things out. Yeah, great. Fire Rick. What up, bro? Good to see you, sir. Any other questions? Give me your questions. What's the best way to work with you? Our team really needs. Oh, the only way to work with me at this point is to join Reside because I work exclusively with our agents. But Clayton, we can certainly have a conversation offline and see if there's a way that we can support you. And even if I just give you, I'll just give you some insight on onboarding and recruiting. I'll be happy to do that with you for sure. I'll make sure to reach out to you. Clayton, who else? Give me more. I'll stay on for 2 more minutes. You're welcome to hop off if you want to, of course, but I'll stay on for 2 more minutes here and ask questions, answer questions. Nick, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, that was really awesome, Mia. I I agree with so much of what you presented in terms of like, James Clear, Atomic Habits, and also there's a book called Nudge by Richard Thaler. It's a social kind of economist. Like he advises governments on how to get people to comply with bigger ideas, just by like getting like these micro commitments and these little nudges, these little steps, and those little wins add up to huge things. And so we just want everyone to keep making. Today was a little deposit. It's a little win for you. Keep coming back to lead
Yeah.
domination. Sunit is a lead generating
Machine.
master.
Yeah.
He's a machine, and it's not just leads. It's also lead conversion.
Yeah.
It's also quality of lead and engagement with your leads. And then also the 77 Hard is like one of the coolest things you can sign up for that is free.
Yeah.
That will, that will,
And I'm going
it's,
to be with you through the whole process.
and if you want to work with me, it's like, listen, I told her like this is a big thing. This is the lift and haul is incredible.
Yeah.
And you
But worth it.
rally your team around that, and
Yeah.
you're going to see amazing things happen. So keep coming back to the Reside platform. Some of you we're going to be able to work with and align with in the future and help you grow your team. Other people we're going to do it from afar
Yeah.
as we continue to make deposits. So thanks, Mia. Thanks everyone
Yeah.
for
I
joining.
got one question here and then I'll sign off. Ryan Raymond said, how do you reframe this so much potential? I feel like that is a lifelong battle for people. So when it comes to people that have all of the potential but haven't been able to figure out how to get themselves there, you have to support with strong boundaries. And so I don't believe in pulling as a leader. I do believe in pushing as a leader. And there's nudges that we can give them, but I have to let them do the work. And so that means that they have to decide if they want to do it. And that's where we talk about like holding boundaries and standards and also like leading with compassion. And so people have to decide for themselves if they want to put in the work. And sometimes it's just a matter of them not knowing what to do. So I just want to give them as many tools as possible. And then I have to be willing to let go of people that won't do the work. Awesome. All right, everyone. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate you, Nick. It was good to be on here with you today, and we'll see you guys at the next one.